Hello and welcome to the Choralosophy Podcast. This is episode 207, Next Gen Music Education with Mac Barton. I frequently engage in and read discussions with young music educators about the ways in which the music education profession is or is not adapting with the times. As always, the answer to that is yes and no. Mac Barton is a second-year teacher in Maryland who I found on her wildly entertaining TikTok account that is fast approaching 100,000 followers. Recently, I was tagged in one of her videos, which she addressed the question of whether or not we are adequately responding to the needs of the next generation in our music classrooms. Is there a place in our programs for a SoundCloud rapper? Mac's initial take was no, but I said yes. And I think, like many things, the answer to that question depends on our perspectives and how we approach our job philosophically. So I think you will really enjoy this conversation just like I did, especially if you value the voices of the next generation of students and educators. Mac and I discuss what it is like to subject herself to social media vulnerability, the traditions of music education that can and should evolve, as well as ways to champion those tried and true elements of curriculum that have endured for good reason. So tune in and have your thinking stimulated and challenged. As always, go join the Facebook group called Choralosophers, or you can comment on the Substack, choralosophy.substack.com, which is the free newsletter and blog source that accompanies the Choralosophy podcast. Are you a director new to the profession, or are you a seasoned director who is in a new place? One of my favorite tips for generating interest in the program and to instill buy-in is to plan a trip. There are so many options. You can go to Orlando, you can go to Ireland, or you can perform in a parade or a theme park. You can even take the stage at Carnegie Hall in New York. Wherever you end up, not only will your current crew look forward to the trip, but younger students will count the days until it's their turn to go. If you have no idea where to start, connect with Kaleidoscope Adventures at mykatrip.com. Ludus, the platform trusted by thousands of organizers to power their event ticketing, marketing, and fundraising, has just upped its game with an incredible new feature, volunteer management. Now you can streamline your volunteer coordination like never before. Volunteers can easily sign up for opportunities and shifts online while you effortlessly approve sign-ups, track hours, and manage your volunteer team. Say goodbye to volunteer management headaches and hello to seamless coordination with Ludus. Try it at ludus.com/choralosophy and revolutionize your events. The content on the Choralosophy podcast is free. One of the ways that I make that happen is by asking for your help. If you can support the show on Patreon or on Substack, I appreciate it, and it really does make this whole thing work. Quick shout out to everyone on the Patreon at the producer level or higher: Brian Long, Venture Studios, Jonah Clixbull, Angie Schilling, David Kowalczyk, Kyle Peterson, Max Jackson, Michael Herron, Ryan Main, Stephen Kathy Kakachik. Okay, everybody, I am here with Mackenzie Barton, and I think I'll just use Mac because it's less syllables. Welcome, Mac, to the show.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
This is going to be fun. So let me give the audience a little bit of a background on where this conversation came from and kind of what our goals are. So recently on TikTok, which is an app that I am on, but I'm not very good at, I was tagged in a video that Mac made about the kind of the state of music education and some ideas about how music education could be better. And I don't know who that person was that tagged me, but I'm just assuming that I was tagged because it kind of sounds like the types of things that I talk about a lot on this show. And I thought the video was interesting. And then I found some other videos, and I've been following you for quite a while and have really enjoyed your content over there on TikTok. So that kind of generated this idea for a conversation. So I'm excited about this one. We're going to be covering, like I said, ideas about music education and how it could be better, but we're also going to talk about some other kind of young music teacher things like imposter syndrome and who knows what else will come up. So Mac, why don't you start out by telling everybody just a little bit about who you are, kind of what your superhero origin story is in teaching choir, etc., so we have an idea of where you come from.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm obviously a very young teacher, so that's definitely that brings it like a completely different perspective. 23 right now, second year teaching. Just finished that up. Music was always like a part of my life. Grew up in church. My whole family is from like Virginia and like even all the way down to like Alabama. So that style of music, it was just like completely natural. We all like knew how to like harmonize at like 8 years old, way before I knew how to read music. So that was kind of like my upbringing with music. But then, even like I said in the video that you were talking about, you got tagged in, I didn't decide that I wanted to like teach it until like late in my high school career. I was inspired by what we didn't have. It wasn't even a lot of people have like that origin story of like really looking up to their choir teacher, really looking up to this one person who like showed them the way. That just wasn't my experience. We had a good choir teacher, just not a good person as the choir teacher. But yeah, it was another student actually. We only had choir, band, and then we had a really pretty decent theater program. Marching band was pretty good. But it was another kid in my grade who, since like our freshman year of high school, was writing music, producing it, and like putting it on SoundCloud. And it was always a joke that he was like a SoundCloud rapper and he wasn't going to do anything with it. I just thought it was so like interesting that he was so passionate about that. And he really like, obviously he's come a long way, like writing stuff when you're 14 versus like 23, like it's completely different. But it just seeing that, and like he was way more passionate about music than half the kids that were in my choir.
Right.
And just the fact that there was literally no place for him in school, a place where he spent a lot of his time. That really broke my heart, but also was like, it doesn't have to be this way. So I think that really inspired me to, once I got into my undergrad, kind of music education, switched it up a ton. I actually ended up like making my own degree at University of Delaware and like combining it with the music management kind of industry side of it, and really turning it into a teaching. Sure, you can do choir, but like teaching vernacular music, like what we all want to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Now, is it okay? Will it kind of bother you or creep you out if I play your video so that the audience has the full context of that story you were just starting to tell?
This comment is literally why I became a music teacher in the first place. Teachers that I always had growing up were very like traditional, like conducting, 4/4. You got a piece of music, copy and paste it exactly how the composer wanted it, and then that's just like kind of what class was. Obviously that's fun, and obviously like people enjoy that, and I still enjoyed that. Actually, what inspired me to become a music teacher, the music teacher that I am today, was not my teacher, but actually a different student. My high school teacher, he wasn't exactly like kind of a bad person, but that's a story for another time. But there's this one kid in my grade. He didn't take any music classes. He didn't do anything like that, but he was a SoundCloud rapper. That was his thing. He loved music and he loved making it, obviously, but there was no place for him in our music program. I would say like 99% of music programs have nothing for him. Somebody who is so passionate about music having no place in a school, like no place to like grow your skills or at least gain new skills. That's what inspired me to be a music teacher and to arrange music that we all listen to on a daily basis. And like it's crazy, like math classes have developed over time because of calculators. English classes have developed over time because of laptops. But like music curriculums just like haven't moved. It's like putting that into the classroom, taking the communal aspect of the choir, blowing that up and making that more of like a thing, making music together, coming up with music together, but also just like the student creativity aspect. Art classes are just students creating it themselves. So why are the music classes not that? Why is like music classes all copy and paste, just doing what somebody else is telling you to do instead of channeling what you have inside? And that also kind of goes against the grain of how our public education system is set up. I found that my students get really uncomfortable when I ask them to do stuff like that, but once they do it, yeah. I also just realized I never actually like introduced myself and like said why I do what I do on here. I just started making videos a year ago and just like kind of kept going. That's why I became a music teacher.
All right. So it's really good. They're really good stuff. And what I think probably why whoever random person found that I might be interested in having this conversation with you is because I talk about a lot of tension related to those ideas that you just discussed. For example, here's my tension. A choir is a very particular type of medium where music is made in a certain type of way. In other words, we do, in order for it to be a choir, we're going to come together and we're going to sing somebody's music. Now, there's all kinds of ways that could start to become like a more creative expression. And there are lots of ways to kind of democratize the choral rehearsal to where individuals within the choir are feeling like their musical ideas are being expressed. But at the same time, if if a music class becomes basically a sound lab or music tech lab, then at a certain point along the continuum, it stops being a choir. And so there's a tension there of it, like for us as music teachers, I kind of think of myself in two different hats. So for example, I direct choirs in the community as well, where people are just coming there to sing in a choir. But in a school music class, is there room to create over the course of an entire school year more of a diverse experience about what music class is? And I would say yes, and it sounds kind of like that's what you're describing. So talk to us a little bit about that tension and see if that's something that resonates with you at all.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think it's never my intent of saying stuff like that is never like delete choir. We're only doing sound recording stuff, only doing songwriting. Like I said, like we all did choir because we enjoyed that format.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's thinking about it in like a balanced way. Like
Right.
even like I brought up in math class, you still, yeah, you can use a calculator, but if you don't know how to add, like obviously that's a problem. Um, like without it. So I think thinking of, but also like the issue with like the choir realm is that we've all gotten so used to the Euro-based style, but not even that. Like even in the 17th, 18th century, if you were a musician, it was expected that you were a composer. Like if you went to school for music, that was expected that you were creating your own music. It was just like part of the game. Now it's not like that at all. We've pedestalized that music so bad that we just completely cut off the creativity aspect and put all of our music theory eggs into the Bach basket and kind of just kept that form. Even if we do other styles, even if we do all of our diversifying or what
Mm-hmm.
people want to call it, it's still that basket. And I think not giving up the choir aspect, but thinking it more as an ancestral, like primal thing that we all do, or I guess used to do when we actually felt like, because we can call America a melting pot all we want, but really all it does is just like kind of strips the culture off. And even like where I grew up, singing together wasn't reading hymns. It wasn't doing any of that. It was just like one person started singing and then another person, we were just in the kitchen, and another person just started singing and another person just brings it in. Somebody starts patting on the table, and it wasn't anything other than to just sing together or do, that was just something that we did. It's just like talking.
Yeah.
And obviously I'm very fortunate to have that experience, that I got to, like, that's like the fundamental version of what I think of when I'm like, people are singing together.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very difficult to get back into that. And even like I brought up how the public education system is set up, asking students to create and just like do on their own, like just something in their head it's like trying to take a cat on a walk and then trying to get it to play fetch. Like it's just not going to happen unless you are really like gung-ho about it and on top of it and doing it like daily.
Yeah. Don't forget to use the Choralosophy checkout code at all of the affiliates for the Choralosophy podcast. Those are sightreadingfactory.com whenever you renew your membership for you and your students. New, coming up, you're going to hear more about this later in July, but 3 Minute Theory is now an affiliate, and you can save 15% by entering Choralosophy when you sign up at 3minutetheory.com. Yeah. So let me offer you some thoughts there and see what you think. So, like you said, kind of at the beginning, it's a balanced question, and I would suggest, as somebody who's been doing this for a long time, that the answer to where that balance lies is going to be different in almost every classroom across the country, across the world. There's a responsiveness to the students that are in the room that are going to help determine what that balance is. So let me give you, in fact, I want to compare notes on SoundCloud Rapper Kid. So I've been teaching long enough to have taught several of kids that would fit a similar description. where, in fact, I've got a kid that comes to mind specifically. This was probably 15 years ago that I had this kid named Chris also, and he was a young ninth grade black boy that was in my choir in the Midwest back when there weren't very many black kids in choir at my school. It's a lot more diverse now. The community itself is more diverse. And so he was kind of he felt like a fish out of water in a lot of ways in my class. And his thing, this is before SoundCloud, because I'm that old, but his thing was kind of creating these digital mixing beat tracks type stuff. Like that was his passion. He came in the door in ninth grade telling me about this passion, about why he's in music, because he wants to do this for a living, which he now, by the way, spoiler, does. He still does it in his adult years.
Sir.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Now, the one little quibble I will use with kind of the way your video describes those types of kids is that there's not a place for him in in like a music program, because you're right in the sense that the way that music education is delivered by some teachers, there wouldn't be a place for him. But even in my very, like, from people would look at my choir program from a distance and say it's very traditional, right? Because we stand on risers and we sing stuff in harmony, and we have piano accompaniment, and we pretty much always sing choral repertoire. But that kid loved choir because I taught him how to connect his love of music that he brought in to the choral art form, which I do believe is really for everybody. And if they think it's not for them, they just haven't been taught yet how it's for them. And then we also were able to think about ways to let his talents shine. We do variety shows and pop shows and stuff like that in addition to the more classical stuff. So I think this really comes down to a balance question. It's back to that balance idea: is how do we do choir in a way that makes the kid who doesn't think choir is for them, how do we sell that kid on the idea that, no, you are really welcome here. We do this choir thing, and I know you've never done that before, but I'm going to teach you how to do that. And also your SoundCloud rapping is really cool. Thoughts about that?
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, it's a balance question. It's not even like nationwide, teacher to teacher, even like class to class.
Oh, yeah.
The balance is going to be completely different with this section of chorus rather than this section of chorus. And I think it's the same answer. It's just understanding that, like, that's music and singing and performing is just something that primally, like, humans just do.
Mm-hmm.
So I think having that idea and, like, taking those, like, rhythmic aspects, all right, how can we do this with our bodies? Taking the bass aspect, all right, how can we do this with our bodies? The little harmony, and you can even put that into like the acapella bucket. You could put that into the you can add that into the piano bucket if you really wanted to have some accompaniment. But I think just the basis of the balance is just being open to things like that and understanding that how we were, like, 99% of us were taught, I don't want to speak for the general public, but how 99% of us were taught in our undergrad degrees, and even like some of our graduate degrees, it was this one way that doesn't include student creativity, that like primal human aspect. It's all copy and paste, all things that can be copyrighted, things that can be money can be made off of it. It all kind of is only stemmed from that. So I think I wouldn't say you're in the minority as far as like that mindset, but actually doing it and being in action about it is huge. That was even 15 years ago that you were able to implement that, and that he could bridge those things. Because I would say that's the hardest part for a lot of music teachers. Is the actual doing, and actually, what does this look like? Actually, what does a lesson plan look like? How can I actually explain to my administrators that this is actual work, and this is this concert. How can I put this into a concert? Things like that?
Yeah. It's interesting because looking back on the early part of my career when I was closer to your age, um, I I would say that that type of implementation was not so much that it was hard work to implement. It required a mindset shift, and then it became very, very easy. And I think it also relates to the thing you're talking about, where many of us are taught in our undergrads about this, just kind of how to do this older model, I guess you could describe it, of music education through the choir art form. But here's what I think it ultimately comes down to. Many of us grow up when we are trying to become choir teachers with what I will call the great conductor fantasy. We want to see ourselves as the great conductor, and
Right.
all we know about what the great conductor is whoever role model we saw growing up, and we also probably don't see all the things that went in behind the scenes in their head in order for them to be what we saw as the great conductor. And so when I was younger, I came out of my master's degree, which I see you're currently working on. Is that correct? Master's at Berkeley?
Yep.
That's awesome.
Yes, sir. Actually,
Yeah.
I'm here right now. This is one of my
I figured you
masters.
looked in like you were. It's giving classroom vibes back behind you there.
It is very, very classroom.
So I finished my master's in conducting, and the very next year went back into teaching high school. I had taught high school for a couple of years, quit, went back and got my master's, and then started back up teaching high school the next year. And I remember thinking that the way I would win over my choir that year, and I think I must have been 25 by this point, I was going to win over the choir with my incredible conducting. That was how I was going to get the high school kids, who don't give a shit, by the way, what angle
Right.
my wrist is or whatever. Like, they don't care. And of course, I was young and stupid, and I thought that that's what I would impress them. And once I impressed them, then they would listen to what I say. And I know, of course, I say it now, and it's so stupid. But by the time Chris, the kid I was talking about, came along into my program, I had already learned my lesson, that my job, my identity was not necessarily a conductor. My identity, which I am a conductor, but my identity is educator. My identity is guide for kids. And once I wrapped my head around that, responding to Chris's musical interests as being not choir related was easy. It was actually super easy, because all I had to do to make him feel like choir is for him was to make him feel like I was for him. And if he felt like I was for him, then the thing Mr. Muntz is doing at school, it's choir. All right, cool. I'm down with that. And kind of the end of his story. So we have a choir program that has multiple levels of choir, like a lot of kids do, right? So you have a beginning class. He actually stayed in choir all 4 years of high school, but he made the decision that he was never going to move up. He wanted to stay in our tenor bass choir, which is our beginning level choir, and he stayed in there all 4 years. And he was absolutely good enough to move up. But he stayed in the beginning level class because he wanted to be a guide for the younger kids, and he also didn't want to spend as much mental energy on the choir stuff as he did on his other stuff. And I was like, great, that's great. Well, now I've got an extra baritone in that class, and he's singing really well. He doesn't want to put in the extra work and all the different after school stuff that some of the more advanced groups do. And I was like, great. And it taught me a lesson that I still use today in class, which is that everybody comes to our choir programs with different backgrounds, but also different needs from us. They don't all need to be the top choir kid in their school. And that's okay. And if we can sell that to everybody as whatever you're bringing here is great. Thoughts about that?
I mean, you said it all. Even to the aspect of like the conducting part,
Yep. Yep.
no kid cares. Like they don't. I'm in their minds, I'm barely there anyway. Like, is if you can think about yourself, not even as an educator isn't even a word I would even think of. It was more just like a coach. Like I'm there, I'm a facilitator. I'm like a vessel of all of my knowledge, but here's what I know. Now, how can we use this so we are creating and we are experiencing this and we are and like you can put in just as much of your experience into it.
What have your biggest challenges in your first 2 years been around these ideas? In other words, do you feel like you have jumped in equipped to deal with the diversity of the students that you teach? And I don't just mean ethnic diversity. I mean all of the ways that people are diverse, different learning styles, different cultural backgrounds, different ideas about what they want out of class, different parental structures at home. All the humans are wildly diverse. How do you feel like you've done in the first couple of years related to connecting with kids and all that? Discover the world's largest selection of sheet music and an incredible catalog at sheetmusicplus.com. All summer long, they are running a back-to-school sale, 10% off of nearly everything that you might need for your class. And there are discounts year-round. So 5% off of any title when you buy 2 or more copies, and everyday band and orchestra and choir materials. You can set up your school with a school account, which are free, and then they get free shipping on larger orders. It's a really great place to have in your rotation, your go-to spots to find the music that you need for your classroom.
I mean, I kind of was lucky coming into a program that wasn't like super established. It was like they had one teacher there who was super, like, very traditional for like 6 years, and then he left in 2020, and then there was one person, she was there for 1 year, and then that's when I came in, like, right after that. So it was kind of obviously like COVID, and then that teacher swap, and then the inconsistency with all of that kind of like just broke it down to bare bones. So really I was kind of just take it and kind of just do whatever I want with it. And I had the administration that kind of like let me do that, which is, again, very lucky. But the interpersonal stuff, that was never like a huge issue for me. Just some things that I had experienced growing up, understanding struggling or like different family situations or bad things happening in your life. That was never something that was like, oh, that's crazy that could go on in somebody's life.
Yeah.
So I think because of that, like, I came in with that vibe, I guess, that I could speak to things like that. I think that made them clock in that much more. And even like you said, like, your conducting is never going to impress them. Yeah. What's going to get them locked in is you as a person. Like, most of the kids that I came in with, 9 out of 10 of them, like 90% of them, did not care about the music. They were there because their community of people were there, and they kind of liked the teacher before.
Right.
So if they can see you as a human being and you can treat them as they are as human beings, you really can't go wrong.
Yeah.
But that also, like you said, that allows you to see how you can take their strengths and implement that into the classroom. And no matter, even like the diversity of them as people, is like, you would never tell an elephant to climb a tree like a monkey. It's like you recognize their strengths for what they are, and you encourage them and challenge them in those strengths, in those different things. So I think juggling that can be difficult, but they see it and they feel it. So as long as you can think of it that way, I don't think it's very difficult to go wrong with that.
Yeah, it's personality. It's there. As a person who creates a lot of professional development resources for kind of our ecosystem, I get these questions a lot. Like, how do I make my warm-ups more fun? How do I make teaching sight reading more fun? How do I make choir more fun? And I'm usually like, I don't want to be sarcastic, but sometimes be more fun.
Be more fun.
Just be a more fun person. And because I can't answer that for people. Like, I can't tell you how to be more fun, because whatever version, like, so the way I tell people to picture it is like, picture yourself at your most relaxed, at your most authentic, where you are being yourself and you are able to just be in the room as your true authentic self with your students, at which point you probably will be more fun. And that's gonna look different for you that it looks different for me, obviously. Right. Or because if I'm trying to be Mac in my class, that would be incredibly cringe. Okay. And see, even just me at my age saying cringe is cringe. And so so there's just these, we have to figure out a way to like make it be our true self. And so one of the questions I've been burning to ask you ever since I started following you on TikTok is, how does your social media use impact your teaching? Or do you feel like it does? And does it impact it in a positive way, negative way? Are there challenges with that? What can you give us behind the scenes on what it's like to be a famous choir teacher TikToker?
Famous is that's a tough word.
Choir famous.
Nah, my friends make fun of me all the time because anytime someone brings it up, or even like today, a girl passed me today, like at Berkeley, and if we had like a break, and she was like, "Oh my God, I follow you on TikTok," and I was like, "Thanks." I get so weird about it. Like I don't love talking about it, like out of the context, but honestly, my students love it. Like they love like going through my comments section specifically. And like even the end of my first year, we had like a thing. It was like the last week of the school year. It's just brain rot. We're not doing anything but watching movies. They like went through my comment section and found like their favorite ones and turned them into like Canva inspo posts. Like you just see all like those quote things that are like, there's like a sunset in the background, and then it's like this like the craziest comment that someone could come up with putting it under my page. I think in a way it's connected me to them so much more, just because like unfortunately that is the language that they speak.
Yeah.
Everything that has to do with social media. So I think one, they love hearing themselves and they like listen, so if they see they can hear themselves. But two, it's like I'm not in a completely different world than you are.
Right.
I'm not the teacher who just in your head lives at school. Like
yeah.
It's allowed me to kind of break that wall down a little bit, and not in an unprofessional way. Just I live in the same universe that you do.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess for me personally, it's helped me a lot. I think even in my undergrad, we had to record ourselves teaching, and I learned the most by like watching myself, like what went well, what didn't go well, things that I thought in my head, like, oh, I explained this perfectly. This was like on point. I go back and watch it. I'm like, that was the most confusing sentence I think anyone could come up with. No wonder they didn't respond to that. It helped me a lot. And actually, I started making videos because of my face.
Okay.
The RBF so bad. So like have you heard the expression like a face with subtitles?
Oh yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. My face is that real bad. So if a kid is talking or anyone is talking to me, I'll be intentfully listening, but my face is saying, what the hell are you saying to me right now? I could not be less interested in what you're saying, but I'm listening intentfully, but my face is just like, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
So you originally started making the videos to try to check yourself on that?
Yes. To literally check myself and have something in front of my face to go to remind me to like soften my face up a little bit. Mm-hmm. Especially like if a kid was talking to me or if like whatever, but then I would go back and listen to them and I'd be like, I would hear myself and be like, oh, like that actually went well today. Or, oh, that could be improved this way. Or that was really funny. The thing that kid just said is hilarious. And I think that like is kind of how it all started and then just kept going. My bosses follow me. Like they don't, like I haven't, for them, it's like, if you're not showing kids' faces, you're not being unprofessional about it. I don't really talk about it like in class. It's not like the whole deal. It's just like little portions of my day. They're on board. The kids are on board. Haven't had any complaints so far. So
that's really good. So do you set this is just me being curious and nosy, but do you set up a camera, your phone as a camera, like all day long every day and just hope something funny happens? Or like how do you decide when you're going to do it?
There's certain classes that I don't do it in.
Mm.
Just like a behavioral thing. It's more of a mostly in like there's one particular like entry level chorus class that I could never just the things that they just like casually say, but also like that's also the thing like they're I think it's because of my age that they're sometimes way too comfortable and just like they forget that I'm a teacher, so they'll just like say things. I'm like, I'm a mandated reporter. You should stop right now.
Oh yeah.
Um, but if I know we're doing like a specific thing that day and I want to catch that like moment where they're singing this particular portion, I'll record it. The 9 times out of 10, it's just like I end up distracting us anyway and start talking about something else, which is what kind of brings it up. But I think I would only record like 10 minutes of my day,
Mm.
but the rest is just me actually teaching. So it's really just a tiny, tiny piece of like that particular class or that particular thing. And then the funny bits is just us being funny, I guess.
Right. Well, and just
Like in
like,
that
yeah, it
spot.
just, and that's why it's enjoyable to watch, is it just seems like you connect well with the kids and you're able to just give us kind of like a window into your classroom. And kind of thinking again about the different generational perspectives, I'm old enough to remember kind of, well, when I first started teaching, my students were on MySpace, and that was
Mm-hmm.
like the brand new social media thing. And to where,
Yeah.
as my career progressed, we started to kind of deal with what is this social media thing going to be, all the way from policies where teachers just aren't allowed to have a social media at all the way to policies where that were very strict in dictating how we used our social media and all of that. And now I feel like the culture and society have kind of, I guess, bought into the idea that it's not going anywhere, and it is the language that the kids speak. And now you see teachers all over social media doing teacher-related content, etc. But I felt like when I made the decision, about 15ish years ago, to have social media, to have my social media be open so that anyone can see it, I felt like
Yeah.
I felt like it actually improved my relationship with my students. And I wasn't back then. I wasn't like a podcaster or anything like putting my opinions out there. It was just pictures of my kids playing soccer or whatever. And I felt like I could tell in the classroom that the students were starting to see me as a more like just a normal person with like a normal life and wife and kids. And
Funny thing.
yeah,
Funny
yeah,
thing.
and it is. And I felt like it was nothing but positive. But at that time, there were a lot, like, administrators were very stressed about teachers having social media. We were having faculty meetings about what are we going to do about this, and all of that. And I imagine at your age, that's just the water you swim in, with, and putting you with, like you said, in the same universe as your kids. Does Has there ever been a negative? Like, have you ever come across like, hey, this is a really stress causer for me, or has it all been roses?
As far as like maintaining the TikTok account or like people's reactions to it.
No, just the connection between having that visible social media presence and then what goes on at school.
Like it's weird for like I said, like I get weird when people bring it up to me. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that's been the weirdest thing about it. When people like if I post something that's me doing something that's not teaching. It's like
Mm.
I had posted a video of me getting a tattoo, my new tattoo. And they were like kids were coming up to me like, can I see your new tattoo? I saw your TikTok about it. And I was like, okay, weirdo. But like I put it out there, so I don't know why I'm being weird about it.
Right, exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
right. So yeah, I mean, like you said, it's kind of like seeing your teacher at a grocery store. It's like you don't belong here. Nah, you're in the wrong spot. Um, but I think just like you said, it when they can see different aspects of your life that not even for you like trying to show it to them, but that just them like casually viewing it. I think if that's not your jam, then like don't do it. Like I just recently made my Instagram public just because I felt like I was like, these are just my friends. they can see what like pictures I'm taking and posting. It's up to like I did it because I thought it was fun, and I still like I don't post everything about my life. I don't do anything like that to keep it professional, but um yeah, I haven't really I've had bad comments for sure. Definitely some haters out there, but
Oh, that's the
nothing on
internet. You
like a
can't
personal
avoid that on
level.
the internet.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and it always, I
Yeah.
don't know if you've ever
Totally like you
experienced,
said.
I don't know if you've experienced this, but I always feel like the hater comments, I can't predict where they're going to come from. So like every once in a while I'll put out an episode where I'm like, okay, we're talking about some real raw stuff here. And this is going to get all
Yeah.
kinds of hate. And then people love it. And then I'll post something about like, I don't know, do-based minor versus law-based minor, and then all of a sudden people are pissed off and throwing stuff and
Right.
you just never know what's gonna. And so
It's
I've
so
given up
random.
trying. Like I've given up trying to please everybody with what I put out
It's
on
good.
social media because you can't. You can make yourself crazy trying to play to an audience.
I was just saying, like,
But
even like a lot of teachers get into teaching because like they do tend to be people pleasers. So like that's totally a thing. And even
true.
like yeah, keep going.
Yeah. No, I
You
agree.
got it.
I was just going to take us one more direction, and that is into that imposter syndrome idea. And you made a video about it, and I was really interested in it because, of course, I connected with it because I've been there in many situations. I'm still there, but I think the particular commentary that you gave related to graduate school, getting into a music program, kind of shaping yourself as a young teacher, I thought could be really interesting to get more thoughts from you on because as you know, the 20-ish year age difference between us, there are a lot of the things you expressed in your video. I understood, but like I feel like I've kind of processed through that part of my life, but I definitely was there when I was your age. And one of the things that you said was you had just gotten into Berkeley for a graduate degree, which is awesome, and that's a great program. And you made a comment about like that there's this great program that I got into because other people made it great, and somehow I just like got in. And then you had to remind yourself that no, like I got in, which means that I must have done something right. So share with us a little bit of that background of what led to you making that video that day.
I had made a video previously about things. It was like things you should know as an undergrad music major because somebody had asked me a question on a different video, so I made like that video. And then I had brought up just the idea that like yes, you feel this way. It's such a vulnerable art that both being a musician and teaching, the two most like vulnerable things you could do as a person. I mean, you're doing both of them at the same time
Mm.
and expecting other people to be vulnerable with you. Um, it's so easy because this whole industry is very like comparative. Like as a musician, especially, it's all right. We have we'll have studio in undergrad where it's like, all right, this one person performs, we critique them. What do they do well? What do they do not well? Everything is so out in the open. Everybody's comparing themselves to everybody else. You're auditioning for roles constantly. You're constantly trying to prove yourself. Even as a music ed person, you still like are expected to do those things. So really I brought that up being like, okay, you're in that position and that sucks that you constantly have to compare yourself to everybody else, but so does everybody else. Like everybody is going in here watching all these people that are better than them and being like, okay, I
Mm-hmm.
guess I got to go up against that guy. But really we forget that like, especially musicians, we all feel that way about ourselves. If I listen to myself in a recording, bye, throwing up. Can't do it. But like somebody else is listening to that. Somebody was like, "Oh my God, you sound like Lauryn Hill." And I'm listening and I'm like, "How? That doesn't make any sense." But that was their perspective. And like even if I disagree with that, everybody is gonna think differently. What you think you sound like is not I can go into that, but like everybody feels that way. And especially coming into a teaching job, you feel like you have these new tools, but you know how to write a lesson plan really well. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
But then you get in on your first day and you're like, shit, I actually have like 30 teenagers in front of me. Or I have like 60 elementary kids in front of me. That's terrifying. And people come in, they go through their whole 4 years of undergrad or maybe even a master's degree. And then you actually get on the ground. You're like, I actually know nothing. I don't know a single thing. Nothing helped me at all here.
Mm-hmm.
So I think because someone commented something specific about like the imposter syndrome aspect of that video, that's when I went into like, listen, it is literally having been past it, and I had to, especially on TikTok, it actually kind of helped me get through this a lot. Of the I'm just a wee lass who's just making music with some kids, and that there's people out there who actually want to hear what you have to say, even if you feel like you don't, or like for whatever reason.
Yeah.
That helped me get out of that a lot.
Right.
So just like processing how much of a waste, how much time and life and experiences that I completely soiled and wasted because I was insecure about this or that or that or that or that, or like comparing myself to that person or comparing myself to like whatever. It was just such a, even if like objectively that person is better than you, I completely soiled my own experience because I was so worried about thinking about it.
Yeah.
And I didn't enjoy that experience at all because of that. And that's nobody's fault but mine.
Right. Yeah, that's really good, and and very well summarized. I think I call it Instagram syndrome, and of course Instagram just meaning like a catch-all for a concept, which is that, like, think about the culture on Instagram of the way people make posts. They typically make posts of the coolest things they do and the prettiest they ever look, and they're like the best part of their day or their year, or the prettiest place they have gone recently. That's the picture you get. And so when we look at their life, we see only the best parts. And then when we put our phone down and we look around at our surroundings and our regular life, and we see, well, that sucks. Like my regular.
But in reality, that's probably the same thing that they're doing right at that
Correct. Moment. Yes. And I think an entire generation, of course, now is being raised in that world where they are being taught to look on their phone or on their computer to see the best of someone else, and then oftentimes they compare it to the worst of themselves. And so it's almost like we've institutionalized imposter syndrome to the point where it extends way beyond just musicians comparing themselves to each other. Because when I was in grad school, that existed. In other words, I would walk into a rehearsal space and I would become intimately aware that everybody was peacocking around and posturing themselves and trying to make themselves look like they are the best version of themselves. And I'm sure I was guilty of it too. But then when I left school, I could leave it. Like I could actually just go away and not be exposed to those people at all. And now, of course, people would be able to pick up their phones and see that same person that in school is better than them, also is better looking than them, and also has a better looking partner than them, and like, all of these things. And so I think your commentary about that is really important, which is that we do kind of do it to ourselves, but that doesn't make it really any easier. Thoughts?
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And if anything, it makes it worse because you feel guilty.
Yeah.
Like, nobody said these things to me. Why am I like, who? And it kind of all goes back to like at some point in our lives, somebody told us that we weren't good enough, or like we didn't fit the bill, we didn't do that, this or that. And even to your point of peacocking, we kind of have to do that. Like, especially as musicians, especially as teachers, you have to have a certain level of like, I kind of know what I'm doing. At least act like I know what I'm talking about, kind of fake it till you make it kind of deal. In order to instill confidence is also in the people auditioning us, in the people who are listening to us. But I think we mix that up a ton with how people actually are and what making music is even about, or what the audition process is even about, or what the classroom is even about. We make it personal. It's like, all right, Cynthia Erivo and Kristen Chenoweth auditioned for the same role. Those are completely different voices. Which one is better? Well, how can you even say that? Like that, those are two completely different voices. They do different things. Like their voices match different kinds of roles. And not even talking about like ethnically, like Cynthia Overs with like the color purple, obviously for obvious reasons, Kristen Chenoweth can never do that.
Right.
But just like fundamentally their voices, their tone, the style that they bring into just a piece of music that they're looking at, it's different. But are you going to be able to label one better or worse? No, it's just they do different things, and that's just their voices are different. It's what voice matches this role best, or what person matches this character best. So I think figuring that out kind of towards like the end of my senior year of college, of my undergrad, starting to figure that out, but then really getting into the teaching aspect. If a kid is really like, if I'm not, I don't have to be every kid's favorite teacher. And that's just, I don't need to be that.
That's good.
If it does not, I think at first it would have bothered me if a kid was like, oh no, that's my favorite teacher. I'd be like, well, what did I do? You didn't do anything. It's just that kid, for some reason, and it could even be like, they had a skateboard sticker on their laptop. So that's what started an initial conversation. That kid connects with that person better, and that's fine. Like, I don't need it. It just depends. Are you solid enough and do you like yourself enough that good comments, bad comments, and the internet's full of both, or real life is full of both. Are you going to be good with yourself at the end of the day? But I think that comes with, am I enjoying the experience?
Yeah.
Or am I looking for that good or bad validation?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it just is a inner battle that all of us have to do. And I think it's not just like we said before, it's not just a music teacher thing, and it's not just a teenager thing. It's kind of a universal thing. And I think the trick for the goal for a lot of us, I should say, is getting to a point where we're never gonna, I think maybe acceptance is what I'm going for. It's the idea that I'm not going to ever stop caring fully, like that what other people think, or if they think I'm good. Like, that's not natural. So I shouldn't make that. Everybody cares, at least to some level. If people like them, if
on
they
an
think
evolutionary sense, like that's good. That means that you care about people. That means that you want to be a good person. Like, that's not a bad thing.
Right. But it can only go so far, right? And that
Right.
goes back to the balance thing we were talking about at the beginning. It's if we don't find a balance that works for us, then we can become obsessed with what other people are thinking about us, to the point where in many ways it destroys the mental health of a lot of people. And so I think what you're observing is really good and very very important. We probably all think about it. Now, I'm curious too, like, in fact, I think I meant to ask this earlier, but I didn't. What is the name of the program, or what type of degree are you pursuing right now at Berkeley?
It's a master's in music education.
Music education, not conducting. Okay. I was just checking to see, kind of how that works there. So if obviously, as I'm assuming you teach in a public school, correct?
I do.
Yeah. So, when we get advanced degrees in public school as teachers, we get paid more, which is great. But I'm going to go ahead and go out on a limb and guess that that's not the only reason you're pursuing a master's degree. Part of it is because you want to be a better teacher. Am I onto something here?
Yeah.
I know I don't mean to have that be.
You could be onto something.
Yeah, I don't mean for that to be a patronizing question. I just don't want to assume either, because I've definitely taken some grad classes where it was the only reason I was taking it was to get paid more, and that does, because I'm now master's plus 45 hours, so which means that I'm at the highest end of my district's pay scale if I don't go get a doctorate, and some of the classes that I took, I kid you not, Bitmoji, Intro to Bitmoji, Advanced Bitmoji. These are classes I took. Graduate courses. I am not messing with you.
Why?
I know. And then another one I took was, let's see. How to make infographics. And these were like 3 credit hour, but I could like these were offered by a local university, and I could turn in those hours and bump up the pay scale. So, right, so I'm not judging. People do that kind of thing. But the reason for my question is that and this kind of be our last little thing, and we can wrap this up because I know you've got class to get back to. You're there to become a better music teacher. You're hoping, as we've discussed, to balance these ideas of imposter syndrome against what is realistic for you and you being your authentic self, as we've discussed. So what are your goals in your program, but then in the program you're pursuing there at Berkeley, but then also what are your goals for your teaching? How would you just where do you see yourself in 5 years in your choir program, et cetera, and what are you hoping to achieve? How would you describe that? Well, maybe, and if that's a weird question, let me ask it this way, and then you can kind of pick and choose how you respond.
Okay.
Let's say you're 5 years from now, you finished the master's, you're still teaching at the same place that you're currently teaching. How would you want your program to be different or better than it is right now?
I guess I'll start with the long-term goals one. My concentration in my undergrad, merging the music ed with music management degree, my concentration, I am obsessed with the evolution of American music and late 19th, early 20th century, moving forward, starting with the Delta blues and going through all that stuff. It's really bad. But I kind of use that to feed my obsession.
Okay.
So that was kind of my, that was my jam. So I think eventually I would love to teach that, just that, maybe at a university or something. And whatever comes with that, whether it's, I think just a long-term goal, that would be something that I would really love to do. As far as where I'm at right now, I think I still have a little bit of remnants of using the fundamentals being sight reading. And I'm still kind of starting with that. I think what I want to do this year is implement that, but start with creativity and get them making music together and get them kind of getting those gears turning of musical ideas and turning those switches on, and then taking those sounds that they've made and applying notation, then taking those sounds and putting them together and okay, what does this rhythm sound like visually? What does this melody sound like visually? And kind of go about it that way. And I think that musically their ears are going to be developed. I think that'll also kind of blossom the student ownership aspect of it.
Yeah.
Because you have those kids who are obsessed with choir and music and band no matter what. But those in between kids, I think that would really get them in a place where they're sitting in rows and they're one of 36, but they're there with their own ideas and they can voice those experiences and express themselves kind of in that way. There's nothing to hide from.
Right.
So.
Can I give you a little activity or a little trick to try that?
Oh, please.
And maybe you've already done it, but this is just a thing that I find to be fun for those beginning level kids that you're describing, especially the ones that don't, they're not fully bought into this whole idea of being in choir anyway. They've got to get their fine arts credit, so they're just there. And also, almost no kid signs up for a choir class because they're thinking in their head, what I really want to be able to do is read music. I want to learn how to read music so bad. But we also recognize that it will help them, so we have to teach it to them, right? So one of the things that I like to do is kind of improv warm-up games where maybe I would just be simply dropping a chord progression on the keyboard and asking different groups of kids to come up with different combinations of notes that sound good. And part of that, again, goes back to that personality thing we talked about before. If you make it awkward because of your personality, then the kids will find it awkward. But if you're just jamming and doing it, they'll go with you. And then once they come up with something that they've created, it can be as simple as saying, "Ooh, that's really cool. Do you want to see what that looks like written down?" And almost always they're going to say, "Oh yeah, cool, show me," because like it's a thing they just made up, and they just made up ma, bah, bah, or whatever, and that's do mi re, and then
Yeah.
you can show them. Oh, do you want to know what do mi re looks like on the board? And I can sketch it up there, and then they're like, "Oh yeah, you just wrote that. You just made that up." And then they're seeing it, they're learning to read music, but they're also you're coming at it from that creative. So your instinct, I think, on that is exactly right. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, how do we learn language? Do we learn writing it down first, or do we learn imitating and just doing and speaking? All right, and then, all right, this is what this word looks like. This is what this word sounds like, and
Yep.
this is what it looks like written down. All right, now, how do we write it? Now, how do we? So I think just coming at it from that angle would be, I do that, like, and we'll even do like a machine where it's like, all right, I come up with this part. All right, what's the next part? Or like a rhythmic part, and like getting all the sections to come up with something on their own. But yeah, I think that's really awesome. I've even done something we used to do on the playground a lot as a kid was roll call. We especially I did this even with my theater kids my first year, just because like again, like the culture of that specific class is something that it was gonna work really well. So we'll do like my name is, yeah, something something. It's like an ABAB kind of rhyming scheme. But getting them to like think about things rhythmically and musically. It's like, all right, now this is what this rhythm looks like written down. Looks complicated? Yeah. And that's kind of how I teach like syncopation and stuff. But yeah, that's a great idea. Getting them to like getting individual kids to do that.
Yeah, that's great. So this has been really fun. Here's my impression. You have a bright future ahead of you as a teacher, and kind of coming up in that next generation of teachers who are going to have to do a lot of the things that we talked about on, in public through social media. Our lives are going to be more and more that way. I feel like that's a prediction, but I just feel like that's going to be true. And so I'm excited that I get a chance now to kind of see how that goes for you through the way that you tell your stories. And I think that's very, very valuable. It might have started out with just you checking your RBF, but it's something that I think actually creates a lot of value for other music teachers to be able to kind of peek into each other's lives in that way and learn that we're not alone. So, Mac, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, of course, anytime.
Awesome. Thank you, as always, for sticking around to the end of an episode. If you are still listening, that means you're one of the people who are MVPs of the Choralosophy Podcast, the people who stick around to the end. Of course, the ways to help are to use the Choralosophy promo code at sightreadingfactory.com, mymusicfolders.com, 3minutetheory.com, EndeavorMusicPublishing.com, GraphitePublishing.com, and of course you can join the Patreon. Link is in the show notes. You can also subscribe at Substack and chip in a few dollars a month there. All of those things are great ways to help, and of course like, share, leave comments, be part of the conversation. That's what this is all about. See you guys next time.